Do you usually use a brush to style your curls and you're really struggling to get volume and fullness? You might be brush styling away at your volume. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can style using just your hands and still achieve great curl definition and volume. And even if you're someone who doesn't usually style with a brush and you just want to learn some ways to still achieve volume and define your curls, this video will definitely still be helpful for you. My name is Gina and welcome back to my channel. Here we talk all things naturally curly. I love simplifying things. I love breaking down styling techniques because they make the world of a difference. I'm also a curl coach who helps my clients with this exact thing all the time. This video is actually inspired by some of my very low density clients who really struggle with their scalp showing and they struggle to get that fullness, but they don't want to sacrifice their curl definition. So I'm going to show you exactly how to achieve that balance with just using your hands. So let's get started. I've already shampooed and conditioned my hair, and if you're curious about what I used, I will link it for you down below. I'm going to go ahead and go in with my Curlsmith Miracle Shield Heat Protectant, and this is to protect our hair while we are diffusing. So I'm just going to brush through. So I am using a brush to distribute this product, but we're not using it to enhance the look of our curls. We're just using it to smooth everything out. And this is the Tangle Teaser brush. It's very flexible and not damaging at all. Then I'm just going to run my hands through that because we don't want our hair to be stuck to our scalp. That's essentially setting us up for no volume. Whenever the hair is kind of stuck down to the scalp, like after you first get out of the shower, after you wash your hair, it's really hard to style. You can't really get curl at the root. So I definitely recommend going in and at least lifting it off the scalp with your hands. So now everything is smoothed out, lifted off the scalp. So now I'm going to section my hair to apply my products. I do still like applying my products in sections. That way I get the most coverage of my gel. If you're short on time, I recommend at least doing 2 to 3 sections in your hair. You're just gonna get much better coverage to where your hair is going to last a lot longer. Now it's time for gel. I'm going in with my Ouidad Advanced Climate Control Stronger Hold Gel. I have a huge bottle of this. It's one of my all-time favorite gels. And I'm just going in with about a nickel size amount on the lower section. I might add more as I go. It's really just about feeling in your hair. You want to feel like you've gotten enough gel to where it's slippery in all areas. I'm going in with just a little bit more because I'm starting to feel that feeling go away. So that was about a dime size amount of this gel. So for my gel application right now, I am just raking it in and I'm making sure that I apply a little bit of tension with my fingers as I'm raking it. That's going to help smooth out the hair. So if you don't have a brush at all and you are feeling some of those tangles that I mentioned, you might want to use your hands as some tension. So use your fingers sort of like a brush to where you're kind of pulling on the hair a little bit. You want to be gentle. We're not like pulling our hair out or anything. I'm also doing this smoothing motion. So I'm kind of grouping hairs together like this by kind of smushing everything into one section. That's helping to clump the hair without a brush. If you notice that your curls or waves are just straightening out from this pulling motion, then you'll want to sort of shake them to bounce them back up. You can also scrunch, but you will need to smooth them out if you struggle with frizz. If you simply go in and just scrunch your product in, you're probably not getting much coverage of your gel. It's probably creating frizz from that scrunching motion, which can really result in more frizz overall when you're done because you didn't have that even application of gel and you didn't get the hair smoothed out. So if your hair is free of buildup and if you're using the right technique, you should be able to get your hair to bounce back up if you just kind of shake it a little bit and let those waves and curls form the way that they want to, and then go in and scrunch after you've smoothed it out. If they're really not bouncing up, then you'll want to add more water to help the hair form its shape. If it's too damp, it will probably just straighten back out. So I did the same thing in the middle section as the lower section. Now I'm onto the top section, and this is the part that matters a little bit more if you're trying to get volume. So it is helpful to brush through this just to kind of smooth everything out, but if you don't have a brush, just use your hands to kind of smooth the whole section. That way you can see what you're working with. So I like doing this top crown area a little bit differently when it comes to sections. That way I can really maximize the volume right there at the crown. And I like to take my sections horizontal, so they're going like this, and then I'm going forward until I get to my part area. But the key for volume is to intentionally part your hair for volume. So that would mean not taking your part all the way back. If you have this long defined part that goes all the way to the back, it's probably gonna split. It can show your scalp a lot more. Versus if you have a less defined part, maybe something that's only about that long, going back, so only a part that's a few inches deep. That's going to help maximize the volume, especially if you don't have a lot of hair in the back. You're going to need that hair directed back to cover the scalp. So I like to create my part about right here, and I only go maybe 2 inches back. But for now, we're going to go ahead and create sections in the back crown area. So what I'm going to do is create a straight line all the way across in the back, but make sure it's not too thick, because if your section is too thick, then you're going to end up smushing all of that hair together at the root. So instead, I'm going to pick up a pretty thin one. So here's the back of the section line right here. I'm going to go just a little bit in front of that and then create my section line right there. So see how thin this is. I didn't try and style this entire section together. That would reduce my volume. Now I'm just going to go in with some gel for that piece. If you're in a hurry, you could style that whole section together, but you'll just need to make sure that you don't over clump it. That's what I'm really talking about here, is not over clumping the hair together and smushing it together at the root. So when I'm raking in that product, I'm making sure to lift the hair up and away from the scalp. I'm also kind of squeezing my hands together. So see this motion? I'm going into the hair like this, and see how my fingers are creating that separation, just like using a brush like the bounce curl brush does or something like that, where it creates those clumps. I'm creating those curl clumps in that curl family with my hands, and I'm applying tension with my hand. You can also kind of shake it. That's technically the rake and shake method. It's a little hard to do that on yourself, but that might work if you're having trouble getting your curls to form. But I like to just drop it and then just kind of shake it like this to get the curls to bounce back up. But I'm seeing some frizz right here on the end, so that means I need to follow through with that smoothing instead of just dropping it. So I'm picking up that section again, smoothing it out, and I'm going to hold it right here and then smooth out with my fingers. So see how I got some nice root lift right there? That's really going to be key in creating that volume. Now I do have some natural curl at the root. Some people have straighter roots, which is totally normal. There's only so much you can do when that happens, but at least lifting the hair away from the scalp is going to give you a much better chance at getting some root lift, even if your hair doesn't curl right at the root. And I can even finger coil a little bit to get that curl to curl up a little bit better. Make sure you stick around towards the end of the video too, because we will be comparing this to my usual routine so we can see if this is actually making a difference and if you can still get the same results. Now I'm going to move on to the next section. I'm going to do this one a little bit larger to save time and show you how you can still style with a little bit larger of a section. You just don't want to smush the hair together too much. So I'm basically going to split this in half, which works out to be about where my part is going to start anyway. So I'm going to make my part only about 2 inches deep. So this is perfect to where I can isolate the area that's going to be split in half down the middle. So I'm not sure if you can see on camera the amount of wet frizz and webbing and matting that my hair likes to do right here. So what we're going to do is smooth that out with our hands. But first we want to make sure the hair is wet enough, because a lot of times it's just needing some of that water in there. Then I'm going to gently rake through to get that a little bit smoother. Then I'm going to go in with my gel. So I'm going to add maybe a dime size amount to my palms, rub it together, and then I'm going to go in and rake that gel in from root to tip. I also kind of smooth the hair right at the root with my hands, and then I'm applying that tension as I'm raking through. And I notice when I individually define some of these curls right here, I get so much more volume, because a lot of them do have more curl at the root. And if I just smooth them out, it's just kind of straightening the curl at the root. So sometimes I need to allow for some of that lift to happen instead of smoothing it all out. So see how I'm kind of curling that one right at the root, and now it's hooking around and actually has less weight, so that way it can curl up. So now it's much more defined at the root instead of being all grouped together. Now moving on to the last section, which I'm a little bit more intentional in this section with my styling. Now I could just let this go and let the curls fall, but I have a lot of baby hairs and grays right here, so if I don't get those defined within their individual curl clumps, they will pop out and it won't last as long. So I am going to create a little bit of my part right here. So my part's usually around right there. So now you can see my part is only about 2 inches long, probably less than that actually. And then the rest is going back for volume. So now I'm going to smooth the hair out this way, and I'm placing my hands right at the root to where I can direct that hair this way. It is so hard to not pick up a brush right here, because I can still feel a lot of that bumpiness, those coarse areas. I can feel a lot of those little tangles right at the root. Usually I would just swipe a brush right over this and sometimes that's even faster, which occasionally I will do that and then still define it with my fingers. You can definitely do a little bit of both if you do want to still use a brush. So now I'm going to create some vertical sections. I usually just do 1, 2, and 3 here because I like to clump these curls vertically. So that's a vertical section. So see how the section line goes down? This is where all my grays are. So this is really the only way I can smooth them out and clump those gray hairs that are really short into a curl clump. So I'm basically taking this whole clump, which is not too wide, it's only about that wide, and I'm using my hands to smush it together. So you can even take 2 fingers like that, smoothing it out, and if you feel any tangles, just kind of put your nail into it to be able to smooth them out. So now it's nice and smooth. Then I'm going to finger coil it, which this actually needs to be split probably into 2. That would be too big of a section to smush together into a finger coil. Actually, I could even do 3. And then I'm just taking my fingers and going into that curl clump like that. And then I can see where the curls naturally want to group together. So I'm just going to finger coil them. So your quickest method, if you all don't want to finger coil or do anything like that, or if you have wavy hair, there's no need to finger coil. I would just smooth everything out like this and shake it and kind of bounce it to curl up. These curls are a little thick though for my density, so I'm gonna separate them a little bit. Now that I'm done styling, I'm going to remove the clips that I have in my hair. And the hair is still wet, but if your hair is starting to dry, you can mist it a little bit because we're not quite done. I'm also going to wet my hands because if you start touching your hair with your sticky hands that are starting to dry, it will create frizz. But I'm going to go in and kind of break up some of those section lines. I'm just reaching in from underneath and gently shaking them out. This might create a little bit of frizz, but it's going to help create a lot of volume from underneath. So those of you with lower density hair, I would not skip this step if you're struggling with your scalp showing, if you're seeing a lot of section lines, because we did still section, so we want to make sure that those lines are not showing. So you're essentially messing up the curl clumps a little bit at the root. That way the hair is being used to cover the scalp. That's all that we have to cover the scalp, so we don't want to keep the hair smushed together and separated. We might want more curl clumps on the length of our hair, but it doesn't have to be so clumped at the root, which is the whole purpose of this routine. So I'm also checking the curl clump size when I look at the back and making sure that nothing is overly clumped because I want to maximize my volume, and sometimes curls like to group together, so I usually will just break them up like that. And then I'm also just checking the crown to make sure the hair is still being directed back, because sometimes it will flop back to the sides. The part is starting to go back a little bit, so I'm just going to fix that now, and then when we diffuse, it's going to set that into place. If your hair is pretty wet, you'll want to microplop, which is just where you take a damp area of your hair towel and go in and scrunch just to remove any excess water, but you don't have to do your whole head. If you have areas of your hair that get very frizzy, you could skip this. So we got out a little bit of excess water, but now we need an extra light layer of gel to tame that frizz. I know it seems a little weird, like why would you do that and create frizz, but it will absorb that excess water, and then this second coat of gel is going to really amp up the hold. So if you're not getting a cast out of this Weedad gel, you've got to try this step. And you can also do the praying hands technique, which is just where you smush your hair between your hands, and that will really help to clump any stubborn, stringy areas. So this is a great technique to do to clump the hair without having to use a brush. So for my diffuser today, I'm using the Curlsmith Diffusion with the XXL diffuser attachment. This is my all-time favorite dryer because it dries the hair really quickly, and it has such a large diffuser head and those longer prongs that really help me get a lot of volume. I would definitely skip on air drying it because that will just result in flat roots. Diffusing is really where the volume happens. You can do all the styling in the world, but if you air dry, it's just going to elongate and kind of fall back into its flatter part, and you really want to be able to use your diffuser to create that lift because it will set the curls in that shape. So make sure you're really maximizing the diffuser prongs, so using those prongs to lift the hair. I did start upside down for this routine just so I could really target the front root area to create the most amount of volume. So I carefully placed the hair from the ends all the way up to the root. I also did a little bit on the sides, but then I also flipped upright. That way I could really focus on lifting the roots in the back and on the sides as well. When I'm upright, I also target the root area. You can flip your hair from side to side, but just avoid stretching the hair in the opposite direction because it's going to stretch out the root. Instead, use the diffuser prongs to just scrunch the root. So picture like you're scrunching with your hands. You're doing that same thing with your diffuser teeth. I recommend diffusing your hair all the way if you can, especially if you're really struggling with volume. Now, if you are short on time, you can diffuse for a bit and then finish air drying, but just keep in mind, if your hair elongates at all or if your curls stretch out, then that's probably going to happen when you are air drying. So if you do have time to diffuse all the way and you are someone that struggles with elongation, definitely try and diffuse the entire way so that way you can fully set the curls before they have time to elongate when they're still heavy and wet. Our next step is to fluff and scrunch out the cast. You don't want to leave your hair stuck to your scalp or not fluffed out if you want maximum volume. Now, if you do want your hair to last a long time, or if you're styling before bed, or if you're about to go on a trip or something, that's usually when I will leave the cast in. That way it lasts even longer. And especially for those of you with looser curls and waves, if your curls tend to fall out very easily, then you might want to leave your cast in as long as possible and let it gradually release. But if you want your curls to be done right away, and if you want maximum volume, then you'll need to scrunch that out to release some of that cast. So all I'm going to do is just go around and fluff from underneath, and I just have dry hands. I don't use oil or anything like that. That's just going to soften my hair too much and create frizz for me. But if your hair is more brittle and coarse, then you definitely could use an oil, but just dry hands, make sure they're not sticky with product, and go in from underneath when you're fluffing. And you really want to get in there and go to town on the fluffing. I'm also kind of rubbing the scalp, especially if your scalp is showing, you'll really want to go in and mess it up. So I'm kind of teasing the roots. It's almost like teasing with a comb, but just with your hands. And when you go in from underneath, it's not creating as much frizz. I'm not really disturbing the hair up here as much. But I do want to go in and scrunch out some of this cast throughout here to create even more fullness. And if you really want to amp it up, you can separate some curl clumps. So if your hair likes to group back together, you might want to go around and kind of separate them. And if you use a good stronghold gel, this won't completely ruin your curls or make them frizz up. Another thing you can do to really amp up the volume after you diffuse is to organize your part. So if your part fell back to each side and you want it to be a little bit messier, you could place some hairs on the other side. So if I wanted to put this one over here, that creates some lift right there. That one looks a little funny, so I think we'll put it back. But you could basically move some hair to the other side. So by moving that hair over, that created some lift right there, which prevented that flat spot at the crown. Or you can kind of go like this to direct the hair back again. Sometimes it will kind of split back if you have a stubborn part, but if you really want to get that to hold, I would recommend misting it with a hairspray. So maybe something like the Curlsmith Flawless Finish hairspray, an aerosol hairspray like that's really going to create a lot of texture and grit to your hair, which can help it hold if you do have any stubborn areas like that. I also like to go in from underneath this way and kind of lift it and then bring it forward. Now all of my hair is forward, so that's going to make it look a little bit fuller, but I will show you the back. Let's compare this to my usual day one results when I do use a brush. Honestly, I don't see a huge difference, and I think that's because I typically don't let the brush over clump my hair in the first place. I typically do a blend of brush styling with a brush and using my hands to get the curls just the way that I like them. I don't usually just brush style in large clumps and leave it like that. I think if I did that routine, you would definitely see a reduction in volume in my hair if I over clumped it with a brush and just left it and didn't do any of that fixing with my hands. So I don't know that I even have a routine to compare it to where I don't use my hands at all. I like using my hands to customize the look of my curl clumps. I like finger coiling to help with wonky curls, and that's just to bring out my curls' full potential because they do get stretched out from brushing through and detangling and all that stuff. So some of our curls do need help to actually curl up. I mainly wanted to do this for those of you who have very low density hair and you're really struggling with your scalp showing, you're struggling getting fullness, maybe your hair looks very see-through. Consider skipping using your brush. You can still use your hands to define some curls and to smooth out some frizz, but you don't need to overly define all of your hair. You might want to allow the curls to be a little bit less defined, maybe a little bit puffier. That way they fill in those gaps that you have so it looks a little bit fuller. And maybe you could just brush style some top sections or some face framing pieces and allow for more of that frizz to form underneath. So that was my main goal with this video. And comparing it to my recent low manipulation routine that I did where I didn't use any styling techniques to enhance my curls other than raking and just some light scrunching. I didn't even use my usual diffusing techniques. I definitely have more shrinkage and more curl definition with this routine compared to that one. So that one was more of the extreme with basically no manipulation, whereas this one is a blend of manipulation techniques with just using our hands and not using the brush. When it comes to a time comparison, I didn't really see where this saved me that much time because I did still use techniques to smooth out the hair in sections, maybe a little bit of time, but some might argue that it cost them some time because it is quicker to run a brush through a section to smooth it out than to sit there and try and work out all of those little tangles and hairs crossing over and to get it smooth with your hands. That can take some extra steps compared to using a brush, but this routine wasn't about time for me. It was more about creating more of that volume and allowing for the hair to expand a little bit more to fill in those gaps and those areas of your scalp that are showing. So it's not necessarily about time. It is now day 2, and I wanted to give you an update of how well the hair is holding up without any refreshing after doing the brushless styling routine. And I have to say that I don't notice really a difference at all. And I think it really comes down to the fact that I usually do those manipulation techniques with my hands anyways, like finger coiling and tweaking the size of my clumps and smoothing out wet frizz. All of that can be done without a brush. So I feel like that's really the point of this video, is just to show you you don't have to use a brush. It can definitely speed things up and make it a lot easier if you don't want to spend the time really smoothing out your hair with your hands, but you can still get great results. When it comes to volume, I don't notice a ton of difference in volume in my hair per se because I am still getting curl clumps. I have a few that actually need to be separated, and I think that's just because I still used my fingers to clump the curls and create ringlets. I think if I didn't do that at all, I would probably have more fullness. So I will show you a side-by-side of my hair usually on day 2 with this same gel and with using a brush to style. Let me know in the comments if you see any differences in my hair. I feel like it still looks pretty much the same. I also recently had a haircut, which is why it's so like shrunk up, and I tend to get more of a shape to my hair, like a little bit more layering after my haircut. That's the main difference there with the shape of my hair, but I want you to really look at the separation within the curls, see if it looks fuller to you. Does anything look different? Let me know. And then let's also compare it to my day 2 on my low manipulation routine, where I basically didn't do any curl enhancing with my hands other than a little bit of scrunching. You can definitely tell in those day 2 results that my hair was much frizzier. If you look closely, especially in this area of my hair where I have a lot of baby hairs, those were really poking out and making like a puff of frizz on both sides. Whereas today, they're much more defined because I did that finger coiling. I've been in and out of the rain and it's humid. It's been raining the last 2 days and I barely have any frizz. That just goes to show how well this gel holds up in humidity and how long lasting it is. So I highly recommend checking it out if you haven't already. I hope you found this video helpful and seeing how you can still style your curls and get great results without a brush. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Do you plan on incorporating some of these techniques using just your hands? Do you plan on doing a completely brush-free routine? Or maybe you want to mix and match some of these techniques, which is basically what I do. It's not always all or nothing with curly hair. You can mix and match things to find the best combination of techniques that works the best for your specific hair type. There's no right or wrong way to do your curls. Finding the right styling techniques for your specific hair type is something that I help my clients with through my group coaching membership, which is now open for enrollment only through the end of June. If you want to get in for our summer program, then definitely reach out to me to see if you're a good fit. There's a link below if you want to read more about it. One of the most helpful parts about the program is we do guided styling sessions where I get to watch you style in real time and give you feedback, everything from tweaking the angle that you're holding your brush to changing the way you're holding your diffuser. Those little things that you often don't even notice, I get to give you those tweaks in real time. You also have the option to submit a video of you styling, and then I can give you feedback as well if you don't want to be on the calls. But in the program, we meet weekly. Call attendance is totally optional as well. You can always watch the replays. So if you want to learn more about that, there is a link in the description box down below. Space is limited, and it's also going to be closing for enrollment the end of June. So make sure you get in for that summer program so that way you don't have to wait for the fall one. If you want to see an even lower manipulation routine where I don't do much at all to my curls, not even styling much with my hands, you can check out the recent video video that I did comparing a low versus high manipulation routine side by side so you can see which techniques actually make a difference. I do a completely different diffusing technique as well, and that routine is even quicker. So if you want to see that, it will be linked right here on the screen, and I will talk to you over there. Bye, everyone.